Hello, everyone. This is Professor Sexton with a video lecture on Nathaniel Hawthorne's short story, The Birthmark, and Themes in Literature. Just to let you know ahead of time, Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Birthmark is a relatively long story, so you want to make sure that you give yourself ample time in order to read it. But let me begin by sharing the story with you. So what I've done is I've gone through the story on a PDF and just marked up some places that I want to emphasize as I talk about this briefly. So, in looking at the story, at the end of the very first page, I'm sorry, at the end of the very first paragraph, we see the potential conflict in this story. So in this story, we have the protagonist, a man by the name of Almar, who is a scientist, and his wife, Georgina, who he's just married. Georgina has on her face a birthmark. Um, and as the story unfolds, what you come to realize is that the protagonist, Almar, is troubled by the birthmark on her face. And so you see this in the very last sentence of the first paragraph. His love for his young wife might prove the stronger of the two, but it could only be by intertwining itself with his love of science and uniting the strength of the later to his own. Um, so one day, as he and his new wife were sitting, there's mention of the birthmark on um, on her face, and he makes a comment that he doesn't like it. He says, "Georgina, has it never occurred to you that the mark upon your cheek might be removed?" And she responds, "To tell you the truth, it has been so often called a charm that I was simple enough to imagine it might be so." So, other words, what she's saying is that other people have found the birthmark attractive, but he reveals that that's not how he feels. He responds, "No, dearest Georgina, you came so nearly perfect from the hand of nature that the slightest possible defect, which we hesitate whether to term a defect or beauty, shocks me as being the visible mark of earthly imperfection." So now he reveals that this birthmark on her face actually shocks him. And you see her response to that. Um, she goes from anger to bursting into tears, and then she asks, then why did you take me from my mother's side? You cannot love what shocks you. And so her question is, why did you marry me if you didn't like this birthmark? Um, then what the story does is it goes into a little detail of what the birthmark looks like. So it's like a small hand on the side of her face is the birthmark. And the story reveals how women view the birthmark as opposed to men. Here it reads, masculine observers, if the birthmark did not heighten their admiration, contented themselves with wishing it away, that the world might possess one living specimen of ideal loveliness without the semblance of flaw. And so, as I said, what becomes revealed by Almar is that he doesn't like the birthmark that she has. And it becomes a symbol of negativity for him. For instance, here the narrator tells us, in this manner, selecting it as the symbol of his wife's liability to sin, sorrow, decay, and death, Almar's somber imagination was not long in tendering the birthmark a frightful object, causing him more trouble and horror than ever Georgina's beauty, whether of soul or sense, had given him. And it's to the point that he becomes obsessed with the birthmark, that he can't look at her without seeing it, whether it be in the morning or at night. And his obsession starts to affect her because keep in mind, she has lived with this birthmark her entire life and never seemed to have been bothered by it until he becomes bothered by it. And you can see it here where it's she who raises the possibility of removing it. She says, "I know not what may be this cause to both of us to rid me of this fatal birthmark. Perhaps its removal may cause cureless deformity, or it may be the stain goes as deep as life itself. Again, do we know that there's a possibility on any terms of unclasping the firm gripe of this little hand which was laid upon me before I came into the world? And then she encourages him to remove it, because keep in mind that he is a scientist. The first part of the story establishes that. And it seems to be that one of the questions that this story raises is that sense of tampering with nature. So the narrator then goes into talking about Almar's and his scientific experiments. And so on the bottom of this page, it reads, and this is Almar speaking: I feel myself fully competent to render this dear cheek as faultless as its fellow, and then, most beloved, what will be my triumph when I shall have corrected what nature left imperfect in her fairest work. And so what's really interesting here is Almar sees an imperfection in nature's work, and now he feels that he can correct what nature, according to him, has failed at. And so maybe the question that you want to ask yourself is Almar to the stage where he's playing God? And there's an interesting commentary on page 5 where it talks about how Almar did all these experiences where he learned about nature. But it also moves where it issues a warning where there's a difference between learning about nature and then trying to create nature or to mend nature or to correct nature. And so that seems to be the warning that is issued here in the narrator's voice, but not so much that Almar sees. I'm skipping through a lot of the story here. I mean, it is important for you to read, but these are not really points I want to discuss here. What becomes obvious as the story unfolds is he decides to undergo this treatment for her, to give her the treatment that will remove the birthmark. Because for him, as we've already established, it is an imperfection. But there's a danger to removing the birthmark. And the narrator tells us this, the scientist tells us this, Almar tells us this. So she drinks this draught, and the birthmark starts to disappear. But as the birthmark also disappears, she starts to become pale. And what becomes quite obvious is that the birthmark, as the birthmark goes, so does her life. And so what Hawthorne has done in this story, he's made a connection between the birthmark and the life of Georgina. And for Almar, who sees this birthmark as a flaw in her beauty, because she is described as a beautiful woman, and trying to move this one imperfection in her, he also takes her life. So that becomes one of the themes of the story, you know, this mood to make perfect something that was already good. And so that is the story. What I want to do now is I want to share a short document about themes in literature. And what I might do is, just because there's so much information here that it's relevant, I might just go ahead and just read the entire thing to you, which I try not to do, but I think it is important here. So when we talk about themes in literature, at some point, as a reader of a short story or a novel, you're going to ask yourself a series of questions. Why does it all matter? What does it all mean? And what's the point? And those are questions that we ask when we try to get to a theme, a general ideal or insight conveyed by a work in its entirety. In most literary works, all the elements work together to imply an unstated theme that usually requires rereading to decipher. One of the things that you want to be careful with when you're reading short stories and you're developing a theme, don't confuse theme with topic. Like, so for instance, here, often you will see the term theme used very loosely to refer to a topic or subject, such as the wisdom of youth, loss of innocence, or single noun, loss, youth, grief, prejudice. But these are not themes. These are topics because they're not insightful, they're not revealing, they're not debatable. I mean, they don't tell you anything. So notice this, if we had taken Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Birthmark and we wrote in Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Birthmark, the reader finds several themes: guilt, evil, love, and alienation. That's uninsightful and unhelpful because honestly, you can say that about any work of literature. You can say in Ralph Ellison's King of the Bingo Game, um, the reader finds several themes: guilt, evil, love, alienation, or in George R. Martin's Game of Thrones. So when you look at a theme, you want something that is insightful, revealing, debatable. So, for instance, look at this. Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Birthmark shows us that we too often destroy the very thing we love by trying to turn the good into the perfect. Now, that's a theme. That's insightful. That's revealing. That's debatable, and that's something that you can argue. And so that's what you want your theme to look like. Some of the things that you in identifying a theme in a work, some of the things that you can pay attention to is pay attention to the title. um, while a title will seldom spell out the full work's main theme, but some titles do suggest a central topic or topics or a clue to a theme. Like if you go back to Ralph Ellison's King of the Bingo Game, that suggests a theme. um, List any recurrent phrases or words, especially those for abstract concepts such as love or honor. So think about what the birthmark means. Is that a symbol for something else? Look at concrete terms as well, how they reappear in the story. Um, Identify any statements that the characters or narrators make about a general concept, issue, or topic, such as human nature, the natural world, and so on. So we saw that also in The Birthmark, where we talked about nature and we talked about science and we talked about beauty, where both Almar and Georgina have made comments about those topics. Um, and other things that you want to do is look at if a character changes over the course of the story, articulate the truth or insight that she or he seems to discover. So that's something that you can analyze as well. Here's a simple theme paper assignment. So it reads, choose any story in this unit and write an essay exploring how at least 3 literary elements, such as characterization, setting, symbolism, point of view, or recurring words or phrases, contribute to the development of a theme. Be certain to state the theme in your introduction. So, similar to how we use Ralph Ellison's King of the Bingo Game to discuss ways that we can look at conflicts in literary work, Nathaniel Hawthorne's Birthmark was used in a similar way for you to look at themes in the literary work. So for both of these video lectures, this one and the previous one, what I want you to do is to watch the video lectures, read the work, and read them kind of as for guidelines. Do you have to follow them exactly to a T? No, you do not. But what they do is they provide you some insight. So if you're going to do a paper on conflict, or if you're going to do a paper on theme, it gives you some insight into how you might go about approaching those paper assignments. Okay, everyone, take care, and I'll see you in another video lecture. Bye.